How we do this, we are the truest. Got these fangs super sharp, your shit toothless. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish. In the graveyard, acting foolish. Finna dance with the devil to no music. Cold-hearted, yeah we ruthless. All the ghouls in the cut, let's get ghoulish.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of a podcast I like to call Ghoulish. I am Max Booth, an undead host, and on today's episode, I am talking to Tade Thompson about his new book, The Legacy of Molly Southbourne, which is the final book in his Molly Southbourne trilogy. Great trilogy. I've read all three books. I love them to death. I had to get Thompson on the podcast, and I was so thrilled he said yes. He's not really on social media, so, it's not the easiest to track him down, but luckily he has a good publicist who happily connected us, and I got him on the program. And we had a ton of fun. We talked about clones, as the episode title promises. We talked a lot about fighting. He has a lot of experience with fighting, karate, boxing, and stuff like that. We talked about getting kidnapped as a child. We talked about body slamming children. I mean, we talked about a lot of things. It's the clone episode. Get ready. Get your potato chips. Get your Mountain Dew. Buckle that seatbelt. I don't know what you do. Just prepare yourselves for a fun conversation with Tade Thompson about clones. And also, thank you so much for coming on. I'm a big fan.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here. I listen to some of your podcasts as well. We'll make
no.
my way through all of it. It's really interesting. In fact, you have my kind of people, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm even more excited now. Fantastic. The final installment of this trilogy is coming out around the same time as this podcast is going live. Did you? I believe I read you always envisioned it as a trilogy, right? Like you had the whole story in mind already, but you knew it had to be written in separate books due to the perspective shifts.
Yes, exactly. Initially, I mean, I've talked about this elsewhere, so it might not come as a surprise to anybody, but initially I perceived it as a science fiction book. And I'd really gone full science fiction and everything. And, so my editor said, well, dude, this really, what if you removed all of these bits, this would actually be a really cool horror premise. I thought about it and he was right. It was, and I felt it was a lot stronger as a horror premise than that as a science fiction one. So I made all the changes and boom, that's where the Murders of Molly Southbourne came from. And that, again, that was a very circumscribed perspective of the story, but there were other perspectives that were already laid out. But we said, we'll see how this goes first and then go from there.
Nice. Was this the first time you wrote in this genre?
No. I've written horror before, to varying degrees of success or non-success. I've written short stories that have been horror in nature. Even to my very first novel is something called Making Wolf. It's actually horrific, even though it's a detective story. But I kind of wrote it with horror genre elements. You know the TV show Chernobyl?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so you know how it actually feels like a horror series. It follows a lot of horror tropes.
Yes.
Even though it's a documentary type, true story type thing. But in actual fact, my experience of that TV show was like the experience of watching a horror movie. And that's kind of like what my first book was like as well. And I should say that I don't really believe in strict genre boundaries. So I use whatever I need to tell the story that I want to tell.
Good. I'm right there with you, man. I completely agree. And even this trilogy, I wouldn't say is strictly a Who trilogy. I mean, there is still lots of fun science fiction elements in it, and it's really action packed too. It's really thrilling to read. I mean, it's so fun. You write action scenes so well, and I know you have some
Thank you.
experience with karate, right?
I've got experience with judo, karate, taekwondo, and MMA. Not all at once, but at various times of my life. So when I was really young, I did judo, and of course, I forgot all of that. Then I did karate, for about 5 years. Then I took a break because I was studying and stuff, and then I went into taekwondo, and then I took another break because of life. And then by the time I came back, I just didn't have that taekwondo flexibility anymore. So I tried MMA and I liked MMA. And I think I've segued into boxing now. But yeah, that's my combat history.
Man, you would kick my ass, wouldn't you?
I would not. Just because I did it doesn't mean I was any good at it.
Well, one thing, I don't know if the publicist told you, but on this podcast, at the end of every episode, we do like meet up. I meet up with each guest and we do fight. So I am regretting
good.
this now. Yeah.
Yeah, bring it on. We have to find a sand pit, and from there, bring it on. I love that.
Yeah, the guest does have to bring their own sand pit, though. I don't supply a sand pit.
Not a problem. I also have oversized boxing gloves, so.
Excellent. I hope you just like knock me out, man. That would be a dream. Do you? I don't have any experience with fighting of any kind, but I do have experience writing. And sometimes when I am writing like an action scene, they'll say like a chase scene or disposing of a dead body scene. I like to kind of act it out and like pace around my room. So I'm wondering if when you write like a fighting scene, if you will like standing up from your keyboard and just like shadow fighting or something.
So it's interesting. I actually draw storyboards. So I really love comics, and I've been reading and, sketching and drawing and painting and stuff for a very long time. So what I tend to do is draw storyboards and then describe the storyboards.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I can see it. And because one of the things that throws me out of a story when I'm reading the stories, you can tell, okay, I can tell this person has never been in a fight. This person has never taken a punch ever, because when you see that, oh, this person has been hit 1, 2, 3 times in the face and they're still going, I'm like, well, are you sure? Because taking a hit is, especially say the first time you've ever been punched, it's an existential moment, okay? You think your head's going to explode. There's a bright light and you think, okay, my head's going to explode. This person has killed me. I am going to die. Later you realize, okay, you're not going to die. And yeah, okay, you can take a punch to the head, okay, but it's not a thing you can do and just ignore. The fact that someone punches you in the head is a thing that has happened, all right? It's not something that you just casually brush aside. I don't care how heroic you are.
Yeah, I've been in a few fights, but I've never been punched in the head. Like I used to work the night shift at a hotel. I definitely got into a few scruffles with guests,
drunk people.
Yeah, but they all usually like the main one with me was a guy leapt over the desk to tackle me, but he missed, and then his head went through the wall, and I did nothing. I just kind of stepped out of the way. So in that moment, I looked pretty awesome, but it was just an accident. But if I got punched in the head, I would probably cry. I mean, if I stub my toe, I'm done for the day.
But you see, that's the difference, because when you're in a fight, you've got adrenaline, so it doesn't go the way you think it will go, because with all the adrenaline pumping, you've got adrenaline on one side energizing you, and you've got endorphins reducing the pain in some way or the other. So when you're in, it's different from when you stub your toe. Because look, I can be reduced to tears by that too. That shit hurts, man. Can I swear?
Absolutely, please.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it hurts. I will feel that pain and everything. But when you're in it, it becomes more, especially if you're in a fight with someone who's also trained. It's more endurance. It's what they say. It's a cliche, but it's true. It's all in the mind. Which of you wants it more?
Yeah.
That's what actually, it's more endurance. So basically, you're waiting each other out. Who's going to get tired first? So maybe you better do that road work. You better have run more than the person in front of you. Okay, do more running. And who can remain mentally alert? And that's why I mentioned the thing about the punch, because the punch takes away that mental alertness. You can be punched and all of a sudden you will not know where you are, or you will forget your own name. That's when there's a problem, because if the person in front of you can see that, then they'll finish you off. It's easy. So it's more like, and time, it's interesting because there's this time compression effect where to you in the fight, it will seem like this has lasted hours and it's just seconds to everybody else who's watching you. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. It changes a lot of your mindset, your perceptions alter, what you can hear, everything narrows. Your vision, you get tunnel vision. So yeah. It's interesting.
Okay. So I know, like, I'm not a big video game guy, but I've played some video games. And usually when you go fighting like the big boss, right, they always have one specific weak point that you have to take advantage of. And that's how you defeat them. Usually you have to look it up online if you're someone like me who is bad at video games. So I'm wondering, like, is that true philosophy in real life as well? Like, say, if you and I were fighting, what is the weak point that I should focus on with you? How would I defeat you?
Oh, I'm easy to defeat. I'm easy to defeat. Just wait it out. All you have to do is wait. And then I will. My age will kick in, and I'll get tired, and I'll stop. As soon as you hear me puffing, then it's all over. Just close in for the kill after that. It's a waiting game. I think video games and films and everything, they're very deceptive when it comes to fighting. But I think what most of us forget is that films are meant to entertain us. Mm-hmm. So fighting in films is the same thing like sex in films. Like, these things are for entertainment. They are not what fighting is like. They're not like gun battles in real life. They're not like, it doesn't work like that at all. Action films are actually more fantastical than anything else I've seen. Mm-hmm. Like the kind of things, like you get people being knocked out and then they wake up and nothing has happened. It's not true at all. If someone gets knocked out, it's a big deal.
I've always found it funny, those who like hate musical movies, who love action movies, like, well, pretty much the same thing.
It's the same thing, yes. It's the same thing. The songs are the action, but it's if you remove the specifics, the money shot of each thing is the same. The singing and dancing and the act, the car chase and the fighting and they're all pretty much the same thing if you remove those bits. So yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever been into a kill chase before? Is that something you've done?
In a what? In a
chase? Have you ever been
in
chased?
Real life?
Yeah.
Well, actually once.
Oh.
So I was in Nigeria and these guys tried to kidnap me.
Oh no.
I was a kid. They tried to kidnap me. They were on a bike. Basically, they literally just tried to grab me and I kind of dodged. So they spun around. So I ran and they were almost on me again. So I spun around again. So they spun around again. And I ended up hiding in a really large pipe, underneath, like a drainage pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, so that's how they didn't get it. But that's the chase that I've been in.
Dude, if that was a Stephen King novel, that would have been just the beginning of your issues. You can't hide in a pipe in a Stephen King novel.
Pennywise would have got me.
Well, I'm glad you didn't get kidnapped, and I'm glad Pennywise didn't get you.
Yeah, exactly. I managed to avoid Pennywise.
Not many people can say that. Pennywise usually gets what he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Especially since, we're all convinced that it's fictional.
Yeah.
But all I can tell you is that I hate clowns, and I've hated clowns since I was a child. So, make of that what you will.
Stephen King tweeted something a couple of days ago I thought was pretty interesting, and something I've always had on my mind. Just to segue to him for a second, he was saying how someone had made a list of like the best Stephen King villains, and they had listed Pennywise and also Randall Flagg as separate entities. But his tweet was like, "How do you know they aren't the same thing?" Something
Well,
I've always,
exactly.
yeah,
So Pennywise is my favorite manifestation of a king villain, and I will say that it is the only novel that has made me actually cry, like
yeah.
literally cry. And there's a very specific spot, and it's interesting because I've read it about 4 or 5 times in my lifetime, and every time we get to the part, well, this can't be spoilers because this book has been out for decades. I'm sorry. Look, if it's whatever, I don't care. There's a part in the middle of the book where the losers are fighting with the bullies, and Bill is throwing rocks. Bill and the bully are throwing rocks at each other, and they're having that fight and everything. And it always makes me cry because something like that has happened to me before when I was like 9. So it always brings back the memories of this guy that I had to have a fight with. This guy, he was older than me. I think when I was 9, he was about 11. And every time I come out of my house, he would run out of his house. He would spring out of his house and take a shot at me every time, every single time.
What was this kid's issue?
I don't know. But one day I just said, you know what? Okay, I'm fighting you today. So I had a fight with him and I won. I essentially I body slammed him. So after that, he didn't do it anymore. But then he died. He didn't die from the body slam.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
No, he got ill and he died. But yeah. So I've always kind of felt a bit guilty about him dying. It's like one of those things like, oh yes, I used one of those techniques, touch of death, which will give you a delayed. He was dead within a year of that.
Wow. Thank you for tricking me into laughing about a child dying.
Well, I was a child at the time too. He was cruel. I can't,
Yeah.
I can only feel bad to a certain extent, but I still remember being in terror of leaving my house. And it's very difficult for me to feel sorry for that,
It's also really funny to me imagining you in your perspective thinking, did I cause that somehow?
Yeah, I did. I did have those thoughts, I did have those thoughts because again, you have to think about it in terms of here's a bully. So after I stood up to him, he stopped coming out. So I didn't really see him very much until a year after that I heard he died.
Gotcha.
So it was traumatic for me. So anyway, anytime I got to that part in the book, in it, I would just burst into tears.
I've also body slammed a child, but this was like last week.
Right. I really hope this.
Yeah, I have no other details to give. Just you and I have that in common now.
Okay.
All right. It is a great book, but also the books you've written are just as great, I think, especially this trilogy, because these are the only books of yours I've read so far. But I'm gonna fix that. I also have Rose Waddle sitting on my desk. I'm really excited to dig into that one really soon. I discovered the Molly Southbourne trilogy because a friend of mine, Daniel Krauss, he was posting about it online, and it just sounded so intriguing. And I think I read the first novella in just one sitting. And these books are really much, I think, written to be read in one sitting. Would you agree with that? Yeah.
Yes, they were.
I mean, they're so fast paced. I mean, you have such a minimalist style. There's no fat at all in these books. It's impossible to put them down.
Yeah. So I think different stories have different ways they're meant to be written, so this to me was one that had to be minimalist, that to be stripped down in order to have the punch I wanted it to have. I didn't want to dwell too much on too many of the details. I wanted those to be in the head of the person reading them, because I wanted people to think, okay, like, what would it be like to live like this person? So I wanted to seed it with enough details that you could read the book and then go away and start thinking, what the hell was that? Like, what kind of a fucked up person could think of this? You know,
I'm talking
you
to him
know,
right now.
you know, that's really what I wanted. So I needed to strip, because like I said, we moved from science fiction to it being a horror novella. So I figured, okay, you know what? Strip away all these explanations. We don't need to know any of that. Right now, it needs to become more about the emotion of the thing, more about the humans, the emotions, and the explanations don't belong here, because really I want that creepiness, that creeping dread that works all the way from the beginning to the end.
Would you say a big difference between science fiction and horror is one is the explainable and one is the unexplainable?
It depends on the narrative. Um, and I keep going to films because I think a lot about films. But if you think about something like Alien, which is largely considered to be a science fiction film, but I like to think of it as a horror film. I like to
Yeah.
think of it more as survivalist horror,
Yeah.
because at least I have to tell you, especially young me, I was scared shitless the first time I watched that. All right.
Who
I
isn't?
was
My God.
exactly. So you can't just say Alien is a science fiction film and drop it like it is not. It is also a horror flick. All right. It is
Absolutely.
also one of that. So um, that required explanation. It required a lot more explanation and everything. Whereas some other ones can afford to be quite streamlined. You know, the Turn of the Screw, for example, the Henry James book is really short. It's short and it's really, affecting the way it is. And it's ambiguous. It ends in a very ambiguous way. You're not entirely sure what is happening. It's just that okay, something really terrible has happened, or has been imagined, or has happened, or not. You don't know. But the feeling is there. The feeling of horror and dread, it leaves you with that. And that's important. Even things like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, it's really short. It's a novella as well. This is, very short, but very affecting. So I realized that there have been a lot of very effective narratives told in that really short format.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite way to read anything now. Just novellas. It's just like the perfect length for me, especially when you're dealing with like whole elements. It's I think it benefits everybody if you go in like at the right moment and leave within 1 mil. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to overextend your welcome with this type of book.
Yeah, I think, and I might be getting this wrong, but I think it was Ray Bradbury who said, start a scene as, no, it might have been Vonnegut. Start a scene as close to the end as possible.
I think it was Vonnegut. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Vonnegut. Yeah, it was Vonnegut. Start the scene as close to the end as possible. Which I think is true. Like there's a lot of novels in their need to increase the page count. They're full of padding. And I don't, I'm not interested in padding at all. Like, look, I don't want to show off. I don't want to tell you how poetic my prose can be. I'm not interested in that. I want to lay out the scene and let you feel the feelings of the scene. That's really what I want to do. I'm not interested in the accumulation of words. I'm more interested in the accumulation of feeling. I want to build, I want to build it like I'm building a film set. So I want to build it in the mind of the reader, so that the reader, I'm not going to tell you the precise details that, okay, yes, there was this kind of molding on the ceiling, and this is the working on the staircase. I'm like, no, you've seen staircases. You imagine the staircase. You can build the set in your own head. I'm not going to build it for you, but I will tell you the parts that you can't build so that you will complete it. That, I think, using the imagination of the reader rather than your own imagination, I think is a better kind of writing, personally. People, mileage may differ on that. It's just that's what I prefer to do.
No, I agree, man. I really agree. I mean, I run a magazine and I do a small press, and so many of the edits I provide involve like, actually, I think you should begin the story on page 3.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I think like the difference between like beginning as a riddle and like evolving as a riddle who's ready to be published is learning what details to skip that riddles can imagine without being told.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to tell someone that the kill will grab a jewel nub, twisted it, and then opened it. They can piece it together with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And one of the things, so sometimes the problem is this, you know, in the evolution of a writer, of any writer at all, first of all, they're the influences, what books were you reading and all of that. And then there is what, you know, where do you live, as in where in time, not in place. So if you've been reading a lot of older books, you know, many, you know, like if you've been reading books from the 17th century, 18th century, a lot of time is given to descriptions of place and person before getting into it, before getting into the meat of the story. You know, and now if you're reading something like The Great Gatsby, then that's a pleasure in and of itself, even though it's a short book, but, you know, it's got wonderful descriptions and all that. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you spent your time reading older classical works and then you start writing in 2022, ticks from those books will make their way into the book you're writing. And you cannot expect the, you know, the reader of commercial fiction in 2022 is not interested in the amount of detail that you could get in the beginnings of a Charles Dickens book. They're not really interested in all of that. We exist at a time when we've got information, access to information. We've read so many things, we've seen so many films, and there's so much competition for our attention. So the way we write has to reflect the audience we are writing for. And I think one of the things that I think when we're starting out as writers, we're so anxious about getting the writing done that we forget that we're writing for other people to read it. And we forget that, okay, who are the people who are going to read this? You know, so if you're writing in 1990, you can afford to faff about a little bit because people are not, you know, like social media is not competing with what you're writing. But if you're writing in 2022, you're going to be competing with Instagram updates. You had better get to the point fairly quickly, and you had better be punchy enough that the person would not want to go and check their, you know, their notifications. They want to actually sit with you and read it. And honestly, shorter narratives might be better, you know, for this time, for this day and age. It might be better. There's a place for longer books and all that, but, you know, people might want to experiment with having shorter narratives.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. You can't see me, but I'm just nodding along as you talk, because these are all thoughts I've had many times, and it's nice to hear someone else say them. I mean, we're competing with so much as a writer now. I mean, we have all the internet that we're trying to compete with now. All it takes is one moment of disinterest for the reader to think, I wonder what's going on Reddit today. And then you lost them.
Yeah. You know, and there's no point whining about that, because that's reality. It's not going to change if you whine about it. You could say, oh, it's so unfair that I'm not living in a time when there was no television. Nobody cares about that, dude. Write your book, write your story. Right? Think about the audience you have today. Charles Dickens was thinking about the audience in Charles Dickens' time. You have got to think about the audience in your day. I remember I read something where I think a teacher, you know, like a writer was trying to explain, because, you know, that one of the things, because he teaches creative writing, and one of the things was trying to explain is that he had the students, what the people seem to not understand is that nobody cares about you, that you have to make them care about the thing you write. Like, this is not, it's not the same thing as, okay, showing it to your mother or your sister or your significant other. They have an investment in you, in the relationship with you. So how they're going to read it will be colored by that. Their interest is there. But like in the world out there, nobody knows you or cares about you. So you have to grab them by the gonads and make them pay attention to you. You have to make it worth their while. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
they won't. Nobody has to. You know, nobody has to.
There's so many other people writing books. I mean,
yeah,
it's it's amazing. I mean, just like with the magazine I do, we get thousands of stories every month. I mean, it's crazy. You have to
Better
stand
you
out.
than me. Better you than me. I tried that once, in 1999. I funded by myself. I said, okay, you know what? I really care about, horror and science fiction. So I started a microzine called Blood Sample. And I was a paying market. I was like, look, you know what? I'm gonna be a paying market. I'm gonna pay people to send me fiction. So there was a deluge of stories, most of them dreadful. And then I realized that I was now spending most of my time reading the dreadful stories. And I just realized that this is a full-time job. I can't do anything else other than this because there's too much of it, and that's really, I did it for about 2 or 3 months and I said, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. That's how I stopped it.
Yeah.
I stopped because it was just too much.
I do think spending some time in a slush pile does help you grow as a writer as well, because you kind of discover things you don't like that you didn't realize you didn't like, and you can avoid doing that.
Every writer should spend some time on a slush pile. I think it's, if I were to design a creative writing course, that would actually be my first, that would be the first thing. I was like, okay, you know what? Okay, the assignment for you this month is go and volunteer to be a slush read, go be a reader somewhere for 1 month and then come back.
That's such a great idea. Yeah. Well, if you ever will design a writing class, hit me up. I have some stories that need to be read. Okay, going back to Molly for a little bit. For those listening who have not read these books and have no idea what they're all about, do you want to provide like a brief premise?
Yes.
Okay.
So Molly Southbourne is a girl who grew up on a farm, and she grew up with her parents pretty much isolated somewhere in Oxford, in the UK. And she is a person who's been given specific rules about how to live her life. The rules essentially revolve around bleeding. In other words, she's not allowed to bleed. When she does bleed, she's supposed to clean it up and bleach it and blot it and burn all the clothes or whatever she used to clean them up. And if she sees anybody who looks like herself, she has to run. Now, what happens in her life from time to time, from when she was born, is occasionally she'll see someone who looks exactly like her, and the person will try to kill her. So as soon as she sees them, they get into mortal combat, and only one can survive. It is a fight to the death, and only one can possibly survive. That's literally the premise of the Molly Southbourne books.
Yes. I would love to know just how like this premise even originated with you, because it's so unique.
Well, it was an argument. It was an argument with my wife. It was more like, it's about a person being against themselves. It's about me being my own worst enemy, basically. So, what you need to imagine is, here I am arguing, yelling, and the other person is arguing and yelling back. So we're flinging words back and forth and everything. And then the word that comes my way is, you're your own worst enemy. And then words continue, but that's the only thing I hear. It's like one of those films where someone says something and then you hear an echo going on, you're your own worst enemy. So I tuned out of the argument and I was like, what if I had to fight myself? Like, what if myself manifested physically and I had to fight? And then all of a sudden, I was getting this complete vision of this girl on a farm fighting herself and killing herself and all that. So I basically kind of said, yeah, to the argument. I just drifted away from the argument and I just started writing the thing down. I was in the middle of writing Rosewater when it happened. So I actually had to stop writing Rosewater, which is something I don't do, by the way. I usually write every project to the end before starting another. But on this occasion, Molly was so insistent and the character came almost fully formed at once. So I just started writing it down just like that. Boom, 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 boom. The first draft was done in a week.
I believe it.
It was done in a week because it was, the idea was so immediate and it was so insistent and it was so concrete. It was more like transcribing something rather than imagining it.
Did you have to? I know you cut a lot of explanations from the final draft, but
Yeah.
did you have to do a lot of research into like cloning and stuff like that?
I didn't, because how the clones formed was not the point at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and in fact, that's what made it even easier for me to cut all of that shit out, because it's like, well, actually, this story does not depend on the mechanism of cloning. Say, all we need to know, we know in the public domain, we know that everything that is needed to build a human being is in a single cell. We know that it's in the DNA. So everybody knows that, okay, look, if I get some of your blood, I can get your DNA from your blood. So I didn't have to explain that, because pretty much every reader will know that by now. So why do I have to explain to them that, look, the building blocks, you know, just imagine myself sitting and say, well, you know, Bob, the building blocks of the human being are all in the cell. So, you know, if you have a single cell, you've got a blueprint. All you need is I don't need to explain all of that to people. People know that.
Yeah, because they're just going to say, yeah, I've also seen Jurassic Park. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so I realized, okay, that stuff, I don't need to explain it. You know, I did work it out in my head, you know, and of course, at some point you have to hand wave it because, you know, it's science fiction, you know, but it's not essential to the story. What's essential to the story is the fact that copies are going to grow from blood that is spilled. And it is the consequences of it that form the basis of the story. How did her mother in particular decide to deal with this problem? Because obviously, as you go through the series, you realize that, okay, actually, this is just one particular solution to this problem. There are other possible solutions. There are other roads that they did not take, that they could have taken.
I loved that discovery throughout the other books when we find out, like, I mean, this is a slight spoiler, but not too much, that, you know, maybe the solution the parents had, well, not the right one to begin with. That was such like, it's something you don't really think about in the first book because it feels so like concrete into like the mythos of the book, right? And then later on, it's like any kid growing up and finding out, oh, my parents weren't right about everything, and actually they were just wrong, maybe. I mean, every kid has that moment.
Well, exactly. And I was thinking of, you know, I was thinking like, look, you know, take something like religion, for example. Kids, generally speaking, if they grow up in a religious household, they assume that their religion is the correct one because that's all they've known. And then you go out into the world, and then, well, if you're lucky, and if you're not in like the kind of insular type religions and all that, you go into the world, and then you realize that there's so much more to life than this tiny religion that you've been making your entire existence about. You know, that's what the evolution of the trilogy is supposed to be about. Like, look, Molly was isolated, was literally physically isolated, but as you go out into the world, you realize that there's more to life. There are other ways of dealing with life than what Molly and her family have chosen.
So if there's like an age-old saying, like as old as time, it's like it was found like carved into some old rock in the thousands of years ago, that has to do with clones. And the I don't know it exactly, but to paraphrase, it's basically, if you encounter a clone of yourself, you are left with two choices, right? You either fight that clone, or you have sex with that clone. So I just wondered, like, have you given, I mean, you obviously have given that some thought because you wrote these books, but have you thought about what you would do if you encountered a clone of yourself? Which one of those two
I would
you would
totally
take?
kill. I would totally kill a clone of myself. Totally,
Oh, God.
without hesitation. And I will do that because I know myself. As soon as he sees me, that bastard is going to be thinking, I don't want any competition here. This guy, I have to eliminate this guy, because that's what he'll be thinking too. Like, he'll be like, no. I know what you're thinking, dudes. You know, and the strange thing is, it'll be one of those things where it'll be like, I know what you're thinking, and I know that you know that I know what you're thinking. So let's just get to it. You
The
know,
thing you always see sometimes in movies when clones fight is they have the same thought process and the same strength. Like, what if you tried to body slam him and he tried to body slam you at the same time? Would that create some type of body slam paradox?
well, that's to me, that's just a thing that screenwriters like to do. In actual fact, that wouldn't happen because the way, for example, the way anybody learns how to fight, even if you don't have any formal fight training, okay, is okay. So fighting is a communication, all right? And like every communication, you've got your alphabet, you've got your, you start with the alphabet, you know. So let's say, you know, for the sake of argument, you know, a punch is a letter in that alphabet. So there's a punch, there's a kick, there's a throw, for example. All right. So what happens is this: you have those letters and words, you know, like say, let's say two punches, a punch to the guts, which bends you halfway, and then a, you know, a knee to the face, if you can imagine that. All right. That's a kind of conversation. All right. That's a sentence. All right. So I punch you in the gut, you bend over half, you bend in half, and then my knee comes up and hits your face. Okay. That is a sentence in this conversation we're having. So the other person then responds in some way. What everybody has, what each person has in their head is they have, even if they have the same brain, they've got the same words and alphabet, but they form the sentences in different ways. So it would never be a situation where they're both doing exactly the same moves. It just looks, it's visually interesting to see that. That's why they do it in films. But it wouldn't, it's like, you know, identical twins don't fight in exactly the same way, even if they had the same, you know, even if they've had the same training.
Have you ever seen twins fight?
I have. We had a guy, we had a guy in my school who, who was an identical twin and everything, and we all went to the same karate club, and you know, they would fight with each other. It wasn't, you know, it was never identical.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I just love the idea of seeing two twins fighting in the street, because I wouldn't think, oh, those are twins. I would be thinking, oh shit, clone.
Yeah, exactly.
I've read those Molly Southbourne books. I know what's going on right now.
I know what's going on here. Yeah.
Don't let them bleed.
Yeah, you'll get them bleached, you know.
So, I mean, there's a lot of details about disposing of bodies and cleansing blood, especially in book one. Is that info you just already knew from like life?
So, I know how to butcher things. Sorry to animal lovers, but I know how to butcher things. I know how to clean and dress, you know, like animals. I've basically done everything from a chicken all the way to a cow. You know, it's just, you know, like, look, when you're a Nigerian, when you're a young Nigerian, these are the things that they're like coming of age things. So they train you to do these things. So everything, for example, to do with cutting up a pig that I put in there, all of that is real stuff. It's stuff that I've done. And when you're writing something like this, it's the details that sell it. You know, so if I say, okay, and they disposed of the body, and I just kind of left it like that, it doesn't affect the suspension of disbelief as much as, hey, Molly, what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to carve up a pig. All right. So, you know, it's more, to be honest, right, when people have written me, I've written emails to me on feedback, they talk about that scene more than anything else. I don't know why. Wow. They talk about that scene. They're like, you know, is this something you know, or did you make it up? I said, no, it's true. You can try it. You see, it works. You know, and I hope I'm not talking, you know, I hope I wasn't talking to people who were planning to kill someone and dispose of the body. I wonder if that makes me an accessory after the fact. Anyway.
I don't know.
Not. You know, it does work. You know, it's one of those things like, have you ever heard of the Anarchist Cookbook?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm old enough that I was able to take that out of, you know, that book was in circulation when I was young. So I read it. You can't really find it legitimately anymore. Because, you know, there's a lot of really practical stuff in there. but some of that stuff you only have to read once. It sticks in your head.
You know
You know,
what's
like
odd? I'm sorry to cut you off, but I was just at well, this is going to sound odd. I was just at a pornographic shop the other day because I
yeah,
was handing out advertisements to a book fest I'm doing, and that seemed like a good place to leave some. And they had
yep.
that book for sale.
Really?
Yeah, I
And
was
it's
really.
not redacted?
I didn't check that. I just saw that they had the book fill, but it probably was if I
I
had to
don't think
guess.
so. I'm pretty sure you can't buy it in the UK anymore.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you can't buy it in the UK anymore. When I was a kid, you could actually find it in the library. I didn't, you could find it in the library,
Wow.
but you can't buy it anywhere. It's not in any libraries anymore. And if you do a search for it, you get put on a watch list.
Yeah. Don't do that at home, folks listening.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, by now I must be on a watch list of some kind. By now they must have realized, okay, you know what, he's a writer, just leave him alone. But you don't have to read it more than once because those things. It's just so much so that when I read Fight Club, because what Chuck Palahniuk did is he put some of the recipes there, but changed one or two ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
When I read it, I could tell that he had changed it.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I could tell he changed. The thing is, right, look, when I was young, we were kind of left to our own device. I was able to wander all over creation. I actually tried some of the things that I read in there. I built a small bomb and it did work. It's just that I detonated it under a tree. So, luckily the tree was still kind of moist and wet. So it just singed a few leaves. So it didn't cause any trouble or anything like that. But, the things in the cookbook, they actually did work. That's what I can tell you. And you don't forget them because, this was decades ago and I can still remember.
You've had a really interesting childhood. You were almost kidnapped. You killed a kid by body slamming him. You built a Bob.
Well, I should point out, kidnapping is actually quite common in Nigeria. So it's not,
Okay.
just so it doesn't make me unique at all. There's a lot of kidnapping in Nigeria.
Yeah, but how many people in Nigeria just straight up body slam someone to death?
Well, that's a whole different thing. Obviously, I had access to certain mystical powers that just required a single touch, like a touch of death and all that,
Pretty badass. Rest in peace, child. Man, thank you for doing this. This has been a lot of fun. Did you have any final thoughts about the trilogy now that it's coming out?
I'm just glad that I was able to to finish it because I've got a lot of demands on my time. There's, I do some screenwriting. I do, I've got another novel that I'm writing. I've got another book coming out later this year. So I needed to get this out because what I really wanted was to show people like, look, actually this story had a place it was going to, that there's closure, that the whole thing actually made sense from the start. So it's basically that it's not just me pumping out sequels. Like there was a beginning and an end to the story. So I'm glad I finished the story. So I can because I know that there are people who don't like to read books unless it gets to the end of the sequence.
Yeah.
So I think there's some people now who can now read it from the beginning to the end and have closure, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, as the back cover says, it comes to a bloody end.
Yeah.
I also, I believe I read that it was picked up possibly for TV, right?
Yes. So it was picked up by Edgar Wright's company, Creative Fictions, and I've seen 2 of the scripts and I really like them. I think that's all I can say, but I really like what they've done. I like what they've done with it. I really do.
I definitely see how this could look as a TV show, and I'm pretty excited. You mentioned you will be looking at some screenplay stuff. Is that anything you can talk about or no? It's okay.
I'm working on a number of things. I don't know if I can. All I can tell you is that some of it is animation, some of it is live action, some of it is features, some of it is shows. Some of it is is my own original ideas, and some of it is working on other people's IPs. There isn't anything that I can talk about right now.
Okay.
But I'm having a blast. That's all I can tell you for now.
The last thing I'll ask you about, and you may also give me, I can't talk about it yet, which is totally fine. I read an interview, he mentioned a new book. I think it's called Jack's Law. Is that correct?
Jackdaw.
Okay, my bad. And you said it's unlike anything you've written. Is there any way you can elaborate on that? Because I'm really interested to know what you mean.
It's coming out in October. It's, if anything, it leans more towards surrealist horror than anything else. It's quite surrealist gothic horror. Can I say any more? And it's related to Francis Bacon, the artist.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah, it's related to Francis Bacon, the artist. It's the whole thing was triggered by the life and works of Francis Bacon.
Really,
so you can imagine that it's very dark.
Yes. All right. I know you do not have social media, so I'm not going to even ask you about that.
I don't have social media.
Good on you, man. I envy you sometimes.
No, I used to be. I used to be on Facebook and Twitter. It's just that those things it's not just time sinks, but they're concentration sinks. And I need my concentration right now.
I also think they're just toxic to the brain. So if anyone can get away from them, I encourage them to do it immediately.
Yeah, or if they can control them in some way or the other,
yeah. Like
really
if you had a clone and the clone could do it. Oh, by the way, just to answer the question I know the audience is going to have, if I encountered my own clone, I would absolutely have sex with them.
Okay, maybe I need to modify mine to say that I would probably have sex and then kill them in the postcoital bliss.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a given. And that was Tade Thompson talking about clones. Go pick up his new book, The Legacy of Molly Southbourne. Pick up the whole trilogy. And while you are in the book buying mood, go on over to ghoulishbooks.com. Pick up some of those books as well. Those are the books that we have published as a small press, including my new novel, Maggot Screaming, available now. Thank you.
Live spooky, die spooky.
Rest in peace, Max.